Welcome back, finally, to the Matchbook Betting Podcast as we preview this weekend's Europa League semi-finals. And of course, we are bringing in the very best two football experts, European football for you brothers, of course, in the top right of the screen, Mr. Ian Broadrick, and in the bottom, Mr. Mark O'Hare, founder and co-chief of We Love Betting. Guys, first of all, we haven't talked for a while. How's lockdown been going, Mark?
Lockdown was nice to begin with, difficult thereafter, and then I think once the football came back, it was relief. But because there was so many games to cram into such little time, I found it quite hard, if I'm honest, to keep abreast of everything. It's hard enough on a normal week, but when teams are playing 2-3 times a week and every other day, it's almost impossible to keep track of. So I did find it probably a little bit more difficult than the average guy on the street. So I'm kind of glad now we're into August and we've got just a couple of massive games each day to focus on. And I've really enjoyed the first few days of the Europa League and the Champions League on these kind of single knock-off ties. I don't think it's going to continue that way in the years to come, but for the time being, I'm certainly enjoying it. It's almost like a mini World Cup to focus on, which is great from a betting perspective.
Brothers, I won't lie, with zero rugby going on at the moment, I've actually come into myself as a European football expert. Bundesliga coming back in April absolutely saved my sanity. What's it been like for you, mate? I know you have a couple of small kids running around the place at home, so you've been kept some bit busy.
Yeah, I mean, homeschooling has probably been the worst experience of my life. So I'm all for £1 million a year now. But yeah, same as Mark, just obviously delighted to see football back. It's been amazing, the volume of games and anyone who just loves football. It's just been fabulous. But it's also, as he says, been difficult to get the work in to actually get some opportunities and to bet on it. So having the Champions League and Europa stuff spaced out but continuous almost, it's fabulous. So,
it's been absolute class having these World Cup style tournaments this week. Right, guys, before we get into this weekend's games in Germany, just a note, if you haven't seen it early on in the week, Matchbook is now back in the UK to UK residents, so check us out. I can guarantee if you go into the odds checker grid for any of these prices, we'll be more or less best price, so value always matters. Right, guys, let's jump into, and there's only one place we can start here, Sevilla against Manchester United in Cologne on Sunday night. Let's have a look at this prices on screen right now, if I can just get them up finally. But anyway, here we go for the teething problems to begin. Anyway, Mark, let's talk about this first of all. Sevilla, I'm kind of surprised here, Mark, 3.04 for a team who are, perennial Europa League experts. Manchester United 2.57, 3.2 is the draw. Draw no bet currently, you can see they're plus 0.0. Sevilla at odds against 2.08. And the total is 2.25. No surprise there, Mark, see at 1.8. Mark, I think a lot of these prices are kind of generally based off the outright prices prior to start of this kind of, this mini competition. Am I right in saying, again, just as a kind of, a person who's not massively an expert in this, is there a bit of value here in Sevilla?
Yeah, I think there probably is. First of all, I think it's a really interesting game, this. I think it's almost fit for a Europa League final, if you like. These are two teams who combined have won 4 of the last 6 editions of the competition. So it's quite frustrating to see them playing in a semi-final, but great, I guess, from a neutral perspective. Both came through with tight 1-0 wins in the quarterfinals. Sevilla much more convincing than United. And United going to extra time against Copenhagen for a team who have looked tired, looked quite fatigued in recent weeks. That's going to, count for something in the legs. I think it was very hot in Germany when they played that game in Cologne on Monday. I think that might have had a bearing as well. They do have the extra day's rest, but I have been keeping track of the weather in Dusseldorf going into this game. It's going to be pretty warm again, not quite as hot and humid, but that's certainly something to consider 24 hours out from game. Have a look at the forecast. Is it going to be very hot? Because I do think United have looked leggy. Sevilla much more accustomed to sort of hot conditions. 4 days off is enough to really prepare for them anyway, even with the less day rest. So I looked at United and, they hadn't really been rotating a lot towards the end of last season, obviously, as they went for the top 4, but they did rest Pogba, Bruno Fernandes, Rashford, Martial, Greenwood for that second leg against Lask. And, Bruno Fernandes and Rashford looked really, really out of their feet in that game against Copenhagen when they came back in. Rashford picked up a slight strain as well. So team news-wise, you wonder what kind of condition those guys are in. There's a few concerns to me about United. I thought they were bang average for the opening half against Copenhagen. Of course, they deserve to progress. 13 shots on target, hitting the post twice, limiting Copenhagen to 0 efforts on target. But Copenhagen are a very defensive team in Europe. They like to sort of contain and counter. United had them kind of at arm's length, if you like, for most of the game without creating a huge amount. But it was the first time they actually failed to score in 21 games inside 90 minutes, which is, quite decent, obviously. But I just wonder how much they've got left in the tank for this game, especially if it is going to be warm. And I kind of look at Sevilla, and I think that's a team who just know what they're doing, basically. They've played their way into the season under Julen Lopetegui, who wasn't the most kind of star-striking signing, I guess, as a new coach at the start of the summer. But he's worked his magic. I'm beaten in 19 now, winning 7 of the last 8, keeping clean sheets as well. They've beaten some good sides as well: Wolves, Roma, Athletic, Valencia as well. I think they've not conceded now in over 500 minutes, 7 clean sheets in 8. You look at the centre-back pairing of Diego Carlos and Jules Koundé, certainly amongst the best in Europe at the moment, compared how they've performed this season at least. And the fullbacks too, Reguilon and Navas, have been really well, or working on themselves really well into that team recently too. They're very functional. They're definitely not flashy, but defensively they're very difficult to beat. And I just wonder, I look at those prices and go, I'd probably take them a little bit closer together. I think United have been going off very, very short prices, probably since Bruno Fernandes signed, actually. And I think the market has kind of overreacted to United towards the end of the season. But certainly coming into this game, they're probably closer to where I thought they might be. I still think there's probably a little bit of room there with Sevilla, who I thought were really, really good against Wolves. A Wolves team who, of course, looked down on their feet as well. You look at the statistics of that game. They won the shot count 18-6, 75% of the ball, 14-0 on corners as well. Ever Banega, I think, he had 140 touches and no Wolves player had more than 44. He just ran the show. And if it is a warm night at all, he's the guy you're going to look to get on the ball, spring the ball around, make United work. I guess United do play well when they do contain and counter, which they might do, which is what teams tend to do when they're tired and the weather is hot. But I think this game is quite interesting from a tactical perspective, but also from a betting perspective. I think there's a slight edge there with Sevilla. I'm not sure they've got enough sort of clinical edge going forward. El Nasiri, to me, is not a top striker, not an elite striker against the best defences in Europe. Luke de Jong certainly not reliable enough to come in and start up front. A lot is reliant on a Campos for creativity and for goal scoring as well for Sevilla. So to me, I think the draw comes into play. I think Sevilla plus a quarter comes into play. But also, I'd be opposing goals in this game as well.
Brothers, it's hard to argue with any of that sentiment there from Mark. And I suppose, brothers, and this has always been a hard one to articulate and to price, general motivation in this tournament. And, you looked at Manchester United against Copenhagen the last night, and generally, definitely in the first half, Copenhagen sat deep. You can probably see Sevilla doing a lot of that too. There just didn't look to be a lot of spark there. And I mean, we can't always have bets on the fact that United just didn't look great the last night, but it's very hard to get on board with United after seeing that performance.
Yeah, 100%. Agree with what Mark said. As usual, he's sort of detailed everything very well there. I think there is the point he makes about the coaches is an important one, because I'm far from convinced about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer still. And if you look at the way that Man United play, they're very reliant on Fernandes to be the creative spark there, just in behind their front three. And without him, it looks, Martial, Rashford, Greenwood struggle to create too much for themselves a lot of the time. And you see that when a team sits deep like Copenhagen did and don't give them space in behind to use their pace, they really struggle to break sides down, especially if Fernandes is off his game as he was for a large part of that Copenhagen match. So, I mean, I know he had a couple of decent long-range shots, but generally speaking, his all-round play wasn't great. Lopetegui is someone I was interested in. Mark thought that might be a slightly risky selection for Sevilla. I thought it was an amazing selection. I mean,
they just got him by default, brothers, too. I mean, like the fact that he just made such a mess of the Spanish job by taking the Madrid job, and then he just went on yourself, there's absolutely no margin for error at Madrid. You lose a couple of games, you're out the door. Yeah,
absolutely. And look, he did an amazing job with Spain, and the fact that he failed at Madrid is more a reflection of the culture in Madrid, I think, rather than necessarily his ability as a coach. I think taking a side like Sevilla, who is less pressurised and is in that sort of second tier of Spanish sides, behind the Atletico, Barcelona, Real sort of top three, is the perfect opportunity for him to show his ability as a coach. And Mark touched on it. He's got them organised brilliantly. He's got this 4-3-3 formation that he uses, which when they're attacking, and then it sort of drops back into a 4-5-1 when they're without the ball, and they're just incredibly hard to break down. And then you combine that with the struggle that Man United have against good sides. I mean, I think there was an awful lot of almost hysteria about how well Man United did when football came back. But you look at the quality of opponents that they were beating, and they were all sides who are in the very lower reaches of the Premier League, or they were a side like Leicester who were decimated by the end of the season. They possibly put in one or two good performances, but generally speaking, when they came up against a decent side, they struggled. And I think that's a reflection of the lack of creativity they have when Fernandes is bottled up. I think in terms of the match, I do expect it to be tight because I think Sevilla know how to play in these sorts of games. I think they will look to keep Fernandes under wraps some way. And I think he's going to struggle to have an impact. And then Sevilla, they've used Reguilon and Navas to bomb down the wings. I mean, Navas, looks like he's 24, not 34, the way he's just, he's phenomenal. So, for me, I think Mark's right. There's every possibility that it will be tight and could end up as a draw. I just don't see Sevilla losing. And I think taking Sevilla either with draw no better, plus naught on the Asians, or, as Mark suggests, plus a quarter, it is a very strong play. So
can I just say, I really do want to be with Sevilla. I really do. And I guess if we're looking at this from a neutral venue and the market rates them equal, we'd be looking at 2.75 each of two. So clearly the market thinks United are the better team. The one thing that kind of puts me off Sevilla is their record against the top six, the top five, and the big teams in Spain. They won once against the top 6 in 10. They failed to beat a top 5 team. They scored 1 goal in 4 games against Real Madrid and Barcelona. They were only beaten by 2 goals or more once all season, which is, a credit to Lopetegui's coaching and how they set up defensively. But again, there's almost a slight worry in what he was saying based on those statistics against the top teams in Spain. After they came out and beat Wolves, he kind of lauded United as the biggest team in the world, which is probably accurate. But the fact that, is he sort of saying that in terms of their ability on the field or as a stature as a club? Because if it's the ability on the field, I'll be worrying. Is there a sort of an inferiority complex there with Sevilla that they have to get over if that is the case? Because that's the only kind of down points for me.
I don't think that. I think, they know United are there for the taking. I think he's just playing publicly and acknowledging.
Point games, yeah.
You hope so.
But I don't see Sevilla going to the inferiority complex. I mean, I'm hugely impressed with Koundé at the back. Another young centre half from France. I mean, God almighty, between him, Upamecano, Konate, I mean, they've got just Kouassi, who's just gone to Bayern, and I mean, these young French centre halves are just awesome. I mean, if you were an Arsenal or a Man United or someone who was looking for, or Chelsea, looking for a centre half, you should be all over these guys at the moment. Because,
why do I get the sense that you bought a lot of these guys on Football Index already? I'm just totally getting that sense. I might have an interest in one or two. Yeah. But, generally speaking, I mean, they're just, technically they're fantastic. They've got the strength. They've got the ability to pass. I just think Koundé is probably the least heralded of all of them. But he's been performing at a very high level for Sevilla, certainly since they've come back. And I like Sevilla a lot. So. Mark, I'll just come back to you for a second. So I think we want to be kind of pro Sevilla here in certain ways, but the more I've kind of heard from you guys this morning, it just seems to me that maybe the unders is probably the way to go. And look, I know the under 2.5 is pretty short at 1.61, but you can back under 2.25, which is a half at 2.0 and half at 2.5 at 1.8. That's surely a way to get on it. I can see definitely a lot of people throwing 10, 20 quids on 0-all draws or 1-0 wins here.
Yeah, I think all of that's running. Sorry, brothers. I think that they're all runners. I definitely, that'd probably be my go-to bet here is the under 2.25. Sevilla matches aren't exactly gung-ho. I think 10 of the last 13 have featured 2 goals or fewer. United's defence has been pretty decent actually for large stretches. I know there's been a couple of games where key personnel have underperformed. De Gea, who won't be playing here, Maguire as well, but. I expect Lindelof to come back into the team. Matic might come back into the team after missing the last game as well. So I think defensively, United are reasonably strong. I think United know their place when they're coming up against elite opposition as well. Solskjaer showed it in some of the bigger games away from home. He likes to sit back, contain, play on the counter as well. If the conditions are hot as well, always conducive to a low-scoring game. And actually, if you exclude, I think, the bottom 5 or bottom 6 in the Premier League for United, I think all but 2 of their away games went under 2.5 as well. chuck in the tiredness as well. There's a lot of factors here. I know they're two-legged ties, but if you look at the last 2 seasons worth of semi-finals in the Europa League, 6 of 8 featured under 2.5 goals as well. So to me, it's got all the makings of a low-scoring game. I'll definitely be looking at the draw. I'll definitely be backing under 2.25 goals. And I might be having a 0-0 punt as well, a nice bigger price.
Brothers under 2.25, I presume, is interesting you also.
It is. I mean, I would have a note of caution over that, to be honest with you. I mean, I think the only concern I have is ultimately, Mark touched on it there, we're not in 2-leg semis here. We're in a 1-leg knockout format. And we saw last night in the Leipzig Atletico game, you got Atletico who historically have under 2.5 goal games in most of the time. But they're forced to come out and play in a more open manner because they went behind. And I think if you see, if you get a goal in the first hour of the game, for example, then the whole dynamic of the rest of the match is going to change because you've got two sides who are very good at counter-attacking. And, let's say, for example, Man United open the scoring, Sevilla have to push out. Then all of a sudden you do get that space in behind for your Marshalls and your Rashfords and people like that. So I mean, I would steer clear of the goal line myself. I prefer taking Sevilla, but I think it's, you choose your poison with these things, don't you? So I think, I wouldn't have any issues at all with someone doing that, and Mark's made a very good case for it. But my concern is that with the knockout nature of these games, it might just change the dynamic a little bit on the goal front because people have to go for it. But it's not really different from a second leg, really, and but that would just be the thing that would put me off slightly.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we're with Sevilla's and unders, and we'll get back to best bets. Just before we move on to the next semi-final, a couple of comments in on the live broadcast this morning about this game from Clarky Tash. I feel it's set up for United on the counter-attack. We have a great record versus the top 6 in the Premier League, but how much of a counter-attack is going to be there, guys? I'm not totally sure how forward Sevilla are going to push. This isn't going to be a Premier League tie, surely.
No, I'd agree with that. I think Sevilla are far too savvy to be caught in the counter-attack. I think if you saw the game against Wolves, we would have liked to have played the same sort of way as United might try and aim to as well. They were very, very sort of stable in how they set up, made sure they weren't really caught out. It was obviously the first sort of 15, 20 minutes. I guess it was a bit of a rude awakening with Adama Traore in that break. But apart from that, they kept the back door very much shut against the sort of counter-attack and kind of kept Wolves at arm's length.
The other side of the coin too, like United sat pretty deep with Fred there the last night as well, Mark. So I'm not sure how much opportunity there's going to be for Sevilla to counter-attack. On the flip side, might be good for another. Just one more comment before we move on from Milltown79 at Twitter. Thanks for getting in touch. Sevilla happy to take it extra time and do a dogged Diego Simeone style game. Unfortunately, like you said, brothers, Diego was knocked out of that kind of game after about 50 odd minutes last night. But I think the point is pretty salient there from Milltown79 that it could be that way.
Yeah, no, very much so. I think that's a fair point. I think Sevilla will certainly be looking to nick it and to keep Man United bottled up and then do what they did against Wolves and get it. They'll be very happy with a 1-0, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's how it ended up. So,
absolutely right, gents. Let's move on to Monday night in Dusseldorf. We're in Germany, of course, this weekend for these games. Let's have a look at the current betting. Inter here at 1.76, Shakhtar 4.75, the draw at 3.98. Current handicap, Shakhtar getting 3/4 of a goal on the Asian handicap, as you can see on screen right now, 1.93, and the total is 2.75. Brothers, start with you here first. I mean, you've seen Inter post-lockdown with Conte. They really seem to be buying in to this whole Conte harassing, getting back working for each other. Are they small but too short here, or is the market just about right?
I would say that they're a lot too short. I think the way that Shakhtar play, they're always underrated for some reason. I don't really understand why. They've got a fantastic record in European competition. They've got pace, skill, dynamism. I mean, they're the perfect sort of counter-attacking side in Europe. And, they've got the likes of Gina Moraes up front, who is, an excellent finisher. Tyson, Marlos, Patrick, they've got the young lads coming off the bench like Tete, who've got all this sort of ability. And so I think if you look at Inter versus Shakhtar, I would never have Inter at this sort of price. I mean, they might be around even money for me, but that's too short. And the other factor that I think is important at the moment is a more general point about fatigue. and where these teams are in terms of their physical capabilities. Now, if you look at how the Serie A clubs have been performing in the latter stages of the Champions League and Europa, almost every single one of them has struggled physically. You saw the way that Atalanta faded in the second half against PSG. Look across the board, Roma have been knocked out by Sevilla. Every single club has struggled. Juventus looked out on their feet against Lyon at times in the second half. I know Juventus was struggling with their midfield in that game, perhaps, but again, you look at the way these clubs are performing, and I think Inter might struggle if they do go for that sort of high pressing game and high trying to press onto the opponent. Then that might leave them very much open to the counter-attacks from Shakhtar. They've got the three at the back. If Godin plays, how old is Godin now? 43, 44?
I love the round up there, yeah, but you're not far off, yeah. He's not
getting any quicker, put it that way. And you've got De Vrij next to him, who's a good, really, really top centre half, but not super quick. You've got Bastoni, who's been playing instead of Skriniar. I like Bastoni a lot. I think he's the future for them in terms of centre halves, but he's got a mistake in him. So I think if you look at the way that Inter set up, they will concede goals, and they conceded in 5 of their 6 group games in the Champions League stage. They conceded against Bayer Leverkusen in the last match. I mean, obviously they got a clean sheet against Getafe, but I don't think Getafe have been playing well since the football resumed, and they don't carry much threat going forward at this sort of level. So for me, I think Shakhtar definitely score 1, possibly 2 goals in this game. And then it's the question of what Inter can do against them. So I think there's some value in laying Inter. I think there's definitely some value in taking goals in this match, because Shakhtar, for all their qualities going forward, are also a side that concede goals at the back. Look at their 3-3 draw with Benfica earlier on in the season. They're just a team that's exciting to watch. And I've got a little bit of skin in the game because I've got Shakhtar at fairly big odds for the whole thing. So I'm looking for Shakhtar to do the business here. But
I want to quickly ask you about the outright there, because I looked last week just when it was down to the final 8 after their game against Wolfsburg. They were I think they were about 14-1 shot. They're now about an 8 to 9 or 9-1 shot in the market. There's still surely a small bit of value on that, given 2 wins and you win the trophy.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, obviously they've got a difficult game here against Inter, and then they've got another difficult game against one of Sevilla or Man United in the final if they get through. So they're going to be. That one represents probably a realistic double on the odds on either match for them in terms of 1x2 type market. But I think it's underestimating them. It really is. And I think they're a side that's got a huge amount of attacking power at its disposal, and one I really like. So.
Marco here, I'll put my hands up to this one, mate. I've literally seen Shakhtar twice in the last year. Obviously at home against Wolfsburg and against FC Basel the other night. But it's hard not to be impressed with them on the back of those both 2 performances. Now, again, you're playing a Wolfsburg team that looked absolutely atrocious, and Basel didn't look much better. But that being said, like Brother said, also, Mark, just judging from Inter Milan, the second half against Leverkusen the last night, they did seem to tire. And like we've discussed already, the Italian teams haven't looked at Atalanta the last night. Maybe it's just their season's catching up with them. Where are you lying on this one?
I'm lying with Brothers. I wouldn't say I agreed with everything he said, but I certainly agree with the sentiments at least. Inter deserve to be favourites for this game, no doubt about that. I agree. I have them around even money for this. So see them sort of, short of a 1.8, is a bit of a gasp really for me. But I kind of look at them. I was quite knee-jerk really in the reaction to what I saw against Getafe from an Inter perspective. I thought they were pretty poor for large parts of that. Quite fortunate actually to get through that game. I thought Getafe really gave them a game in that one, and were quite unfortunate not to get something out of it. So, and I thought the potentially fatigue would catch up with them against Leverkusen, who came into it, completely fresh. But actually, stylistically, it worked really well for Conte and Inter. They've gone back to the 3-5-2 since lockdown, which is what worked for them earlier in the season. It's kind of brought out the best of them. They're much more secure and solid defensively. They still like to play, he doesn't like to say it, but on the counter-attack, playing quickly forward towards Lukaku and Lautaro Martinez. And I think they offer a lot of threat going forward, whilst offering that sort of stability defensively. So you look at the statistics against Leverkusen, where they only had 37% of the ball, but actually had 18 shots and 7 on target. It kind of goes to show that they don't need a lot of the ball to cause some problems, and I think they can cause the Shakhtar team problems. I think that one thing that Brothers didn't mention is, for all Shakhtar are superb at doing, defensively they are very suspect, and I think that's my big concern for them coming into this game, or where they do come across elite opposition. For all Inter kind of wobbled for the mid-season, they have found a bit more surety at the back in recent weeks, or since they came back from lockdown. But the overriding point is absolutely spot on, really. The Italian league came back later than anyone else in Europe. The Italian league had more games to fill towards the end of Europe, finished later than anyone else as well. So it's understandable that those players are almost out on their feet. So fatigue is definitely an issue. I would just say that Inter have been in very good form domestically and in Europe in terms of picking up results as well. Conte's obviously not had a great record in Europe, and Inter's record as well in Europe has been really, really poor. I think this is their first semi-final since 2010 when they won the competition, and 2011 was their last trophy as well, which is really, really poor for a big team. So there's potentially some pressure there to focus on. But I look at Shakhtar, and as I've brother said, attack-wise, there's no problems whatsoever about them going forward. They've got so many exciting players who can score goals. They scored in 9 of their 11 games in Europe this year. They only failed to do so against City and Atalanta, which is no real sweat there. They scored 3 times or more, 7 of their 11 games since returning from the coronavirus break as well. You mentioned all the names, really. There's a new breed of Brazilians coming through that squad as well. How that club has continued to kind of, put the troubles of Ukraine to the side and what's happened in Donetsk and continue to thrive is really admirable. But defensively, when they got Piatov in goal, he's far from reliable as a kind of backstick. Just 4 clean sheets in 17 across all competitions since late February. Most of those games were against much weaker domestic opposition as well. In Europe, it's just 1 clean sheet in 28, and that was the game against Wolfsburg. Not really acceptable for a team who should be, aspiring to try and win this competition, and I believe they have got an opportunity to win the competition, but that is the big bugbear for me. I thought it was quite interesting coming into that quarterfinal. Luis Castro, the coach, brought in Bondar for at centre half for his European debut for Shakhtar. He was part of the Ukraine's team that won the Under-20 World Cup. Very promising, but it's a big ask to be stepping straight into your European debut in such a game of such stature as well. So there's potentially an issue there at centre half. Is there a relationship or a partnership that's been, ready for the task of not just Lukaku but Martinez as well? So yeah, and I guess the other tidbit as well from the game against Basel that kind of stuck out to me goes back to fatigue. Really, Basel were playing their 16th game in about 8.5 weeks. It was Shakhtar's 11th. Well, Inter are coming into this game. I think this is their 17th game in 9 weeks. So they're playing basically every 3 or 4 days compared to Shakhtar, who are much well rested. So I kind of going around the houses there, I guess. I know, kind of trying to find the positives and negatives in both teams. But for me, you go back to the price, which is always the most important part. Inter are too short. I was amazed, to be honest, if you could find Shakhtar with a plus goal start on the Asian handicap at anything remotely backable. 1.66. I know it's very short and something to be putting up on a podcast, but getting your money back even if they lose by 1 goal, that massively appeals to me. The draw or Shakhtar win, obviously paying out. And also I go back to Brothers as well with goals as well. I kind of looked to over 2 3/4 goals at the price and the line. I thought, yeah, that's okay. But considering you can get both teams to score at basically the same price as over 2.5 goals, to me, I think BTTS is a standout there. I mentioned Shakhtar's issues defensively. Brothers has already talked about their absolute ability going forward. So I think, in contrast to the other semi-final, this is the one which could be really good fun. I expect Shakhtar to go for it from the off, but I also think stylistically it could work for Inter if they are kind of anywhere close to being 100%, which I believe they're probably not.
BTTS about 1.7 shot mark, but look, winners will win when you get them. Brothers, I may have missed it, or would just confirm what your general betting angle is for this one.
I was just going to make one further point in terms of I just, if you look at the situation of Shakhtar in Ukraine, they won the league at the end of the season. So what they were able to do, if you look at their last 4, 5, 6 league games, they were resting Maric, they were resting Tyson, they were letting the young sort of the substitutes bench basically play in those matches. I think Tete scored 4 in his last 4 games in the league, for example. And so although they've played 11 games as a club in that period, the main players for them are all really well rested. And I think that the level of physical fitness for these players, whilst also retaining some match sharpness, really gives them an edge, which might sort of bridge the gap between. Mark's right, Inter have got more quality on paper, and Lukaku and Lautaro, will have success against the Shakhtar defence. I'm certain that Inter will score once or twice themselves. I really like both teams to score. I really like goals, and I really like Shakhtar. So I think it's going to be a fun game. I really, of all of the matches, I think this is the one that could be really entertaining.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny that way, brothers. It's I think it's a game that's going to escape a lot of people's radars, with the Champions League on at the same time. So, but it's Monday night in Dusseldorf. Okay, so brothers definitely pushing the lay button on Inter at 1.76 at the moment. Brothers, we won't take too much of a chance there, guys. If I had to ask you for one bet out of all of these, I probably know that we're probably going to play more than one bet. But if I had to ask you for one best bet out of both games, what would it be? Mark, yourself first.
Yeah, I just mentioned it. I think both teams to score. If you can get 1.7, I think you're laughing really on both teams to score in that game. I know it's short, but these are two teams who I expressed, Inter's potential improvement defensively since they switched back to the 3-5-2. But going forward, they've got no problem scoring goals with those two up front against that Shakhtar defence. But on the flip side, that Shakhtar team, all they know really is attack. So much ability going forward, and I expect them to get a goal at least.
Brothers, best bet for the Europa League semi-finals?
Same game, and as Mark's taken both teams to score, I'll take over 3. I know you mentioned over 2.75, but I think taking over 3 gives you bigger odds and bigger risk. But I think this is a match that could easily finish a 3-2 or a 2-2, that kind of scoreline. So
good odds against there at the time of recording for over 3.0, and it's 2.12 at Matchbook at the moment. Right, that is it. We're done, but fear not. The two gentlemen are back next Monday to preview the Champions League final. We may just bring back Phil Kitromidis as well. I think he's off work at the moment, Real Madrid, not in the Champions League. He'll love me for saying that, obviously. So that's it. We are done. We are out of here until Monday. Thanks for watching, or thanks for listening today. Stay safe, and we will talk to you next week.